So a couple years ago, I did a short video in which I sat through a load screen of WCW Nitro for the original Sony PlayStation. I had intended to play the game, but it wouldn't load.
Why isn't this loading? I'm sorry, but this isn't exactly the greatest loading screen in the history of our sport.
Despite sampling some cleaning methods and testing the game on several PlayStation systems, both classic and mini, the game would simply not load. So it ended up being a drink coaster for a couple of weeks, and then I went back to playing SmackDown. Still, I wanted to do a video of sorts on WCW Nitro, but I've yet to find a PlayStation version on the flea market that would actually work, not only for video sake, but also for the collection. Since that's not going to be happening anytime soon, I might as well cover the other version of WCW Nitro that I do have, and this version works fine. Well, such as it is. So here's WCW Nitro, released early 1999 for Windows 95. And it even says so on the disc, Windows 95. But it works on my rinky-dink system running Windows XP. Yeah, that's right, I still run Windows XP because I'm cheap. Choke on that, Windows 7 users. Heh! Wait, did I say that out loud? Strangely enough, this version of Nitro was also released on the Nintendo 64, even though that console already had two perfectly good WCW offerings in the form of World Tour and Revenge. But back to the Windows version. First positive about this version of Nitro is the lack of any 20-minute load times. The opening video plays and I'm taken straight to the title screen. Nice. From there we're taken to the menu. The original Nitro on PlayStation had very few modes of play, from what I understand. Only singles and tag team matches, not much customization beyond time limit, enabling run-ins, and ring selection. This version of Nitro on the PC includes a Battle Royal mode, which is essentially a Royal Rumble match. 4 wrestlers in the ring, and once one is eliminated via tossing over the top rope, another will take his place until all 30 superstars are, in. It's not a bad addition, and you could unlock wrestlers here if you don't want to go through the tournament mode, which is how you would normally unlock extra wrestlers. The tournament mode is basically your default championship mode, where you battle a number of wrestlers on your way to the belt. They don't specify which belt you're competing for, whether it's the world title, or the US title, or the Western States Heritage title. It's just a belt. Yeah, these days just try to make a game where you're fighting for the belt. Yeah, that's gonna go over well with the WWE creative team. But I digress. And the number of matches you partake in the tournament mode depends on the wrestlers you pick out. So you can either wrestle as many as 10 matches on your way to the belt, or as few as 3, depending on the wrestler you pick. So if you pick someone like, I don't know, Kimberly, you only wrestle 3 matches on your way to the belt. I don't know, but that seems a bit suspect, wouldn't you say? I mean, the top tier guys need to wrestle more matches for the belt than the lower tier guys, even though they're more top of the card and the lower tier guys are... Shouldn't that be the other way around, really? I don't know, maybe I'm thinking too much into this. Probably am. Speaking of the roster, though, it's been updated from the original PlayStation version. So now you have guys like Goldberg and Bret Hart in the game, and some guys like Sting have updated appearances given recent occurrences in WCW television. Well, as recent as 1998 WCW television, I guess. As you complete tournaments and win battle royals, you'll unlock more wrestlers, but one notable omission in the game is Ric Flair, who was having legal issues with WCW around the time of game development. Although by the end of 1998, he was already back on television as storyline president of WCW, so I don't know what the deal is. So once you pick out a wrestler, and an opponent if you're playing a basic exhibition match, you start your match. Obviously the point of the game is to win matches via pinfall, submission, or even countout. You'll need to pull off some moves to bring your opponent down before you can even attempt such a thing. In order to perform these moves, you have to key in button combinations. Each wrestler has a number of special moves along with a finisher that you can perform when your opponent's meter is in the red, and each of these moves requires some kind of weird button combination. In a way, it's sort of like the acclaim offerings of the time, such as WWF Attitude or the ECW video games, although WCW Nitro doesn't contain nearly as many moves. Also, there's no moves list that you could access in-game, so unless you have the instruction manual on hand or can be bothered to look up an online guide, you'll mostly find yourself mashing buttons in hope of pulling off more basic moves such as suplexes and power bombs. There's not even a dedicated grapple button, only an action button that has a number of functions, including pinning a downed opponent and entering and exiting a ring. This causes problems at times in that when I want to pin my opponent near the edge of the ring, I end up getting out of it. It's annoying, but not a major flaw. It only serves to remind you that, get the asshole in the middle of the ring and pin him there. In terms of control, I find the default keyboard mapping to be a bit of a mess. Using the arrow keys to move about while doing everything else is kind of weird when it comes to this kind of thing. Besides, what's wrong with WASD? It worked fine for me when I was playing other PC fighters such as Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat. Fortunately, you could customize the controls or even use a gamepad or a joystick if you desire, which is a good thing because I have no interest in killing my keyboard with this kind of game. Aside from that, controls work alright for the most part. Sometimes it's a hassle to key in moves with a specific button combination and nothing executes as a result, but eventually I can pull off a diamond cutter after a couple of tries. It works for the most part, but I'm generally not too fond of the gameplay. Not many unique moves among wrestlers, and it can be a bit of a hassle to pull off some of these moves at times, given how controls seem non-responsive. It doesn't break the game or anything, but a simpler grappling system that allowed for more unique attacks would have made the game a tad better, perhaps a tad more enjoyable as well. Also, the game moves at a snail's pace. It really feels sluggish at times. Look, I know Hogan moves about as fast as a dead slug these days, but come on, even he moved faster than this in WCW. Now maybe if this were a TNA game in 2012, I could sort of understand, I could even give it a pass, but still. For a 1999 computer game release that was originally a PlayStation game, WCW Nitro certainly looks adequate. The characters are kind of blocking, they tend to look somewhat rubbish at times, but you can make out what they look like, and they sort of resemble who they're supposed to anyway, so there's that. The rings look rather nice, I think, with various WCW rings in the game, and some other weird stuff that they tossed in there as well. Like this stage, for example, it's kinda, yeah. There's also occasional clipping that happens at times, but that's to be expected with this sort of game. There's also in-game videos such as wrestler rants and a generic ending video you're rewarded with when you win the tournament mode. By today's standards, they're not all that great looking. You're likely to find better quality video on YouTube. But I suppose for 1999 it looks fine, so I can't knock it all that much. There's not much to say in regards to sound. The Nitro theme is in there. There's also other pieces of generic music that adds nothing to the game, but does help to make the game feel less empty, I suppose. Probably served about as much purpose as in-game music in the WWF SmackDown games on the PlayStation that would come later on. Another thing that adds nothing to the game is the commentary. Or at least what they try to pass as commentary. I'm sorry, but even WWF In Your House had more insightful commentary than this game. Fortunately, WCW commentary in video games would improve over time, just not in a WCW game, I'm afraid. Oops. All things considered, WCW Nitro was a pretty weak offering, and PC owners I feel got shafted with this release, while around the same time, PlayStation owners were getting a second dose with WCW NWO Thunder, a game that isn't necessarily better per se, but has slightly more features than Nitro, such as a steel cage match. As for Nitro, the addition of a Battle Royal match, and network play if you could get it to work that is, along with the updated roster are marginal improvements to the overall package, but the gameplay itself is where things tend to be hit and miss, with its slow pace, questionable controls, and really limiting setup. For what it's worth, the game is at least somewhat playable, and if you can figure out the moveset for the various wrestlers and can con a friend or two into giving this game a shot, then Nitro might be fun for short-term doses, but not much more than that. Eventually you'll be longing for a better, well-rounded wrestling game, something that WCW Nitro does not necessarily offer. It's not as bad as I thought it would be, but clearly not as good as it could have been. Maybe if you had no other gaming console and longed for the glory days of World Championship Wrestling, then this game might be worth picking up, but there's nothing here that you can't find better elsewhere.